Hey guys, I'm Mono, and this is an edited version of a 2-hour-long interview, or rather chat, that I had with Max, the lead developer over at Black Matter Games, creators of Hell Let Loose. Throughout the course of those 2 hours, we talked about different issues regarding the game, from Barbwire to Airheads to map design, historical accuracy, and the console release. We went back and forth on each of these topics multiple times, so I tried my best at cutting and grouping everything in a somewhat logical order, so I could have each topic, like say Airheads, in a single part of the video, when in reality we touched on it at multiple different moments throughout those 2 hours. I've also indexed the video, so if people only want to hear what Max had to say about, say, map design or game balance or whatever, you can easily find that in the timeline below. By reducing the 2 hours of footage into a sub 1 hour video, I've obviously cut a lot of things out, mostly a very lengthy dive into the specifics of Stalingrad map design that went on for like half an hour. Let me know down in the comment sections if you guys would be interested in seeing the full interview, in order to link that right here in the top right corner. You can also just listen to this, since there's not really much relevance between what we talk about and what you see on the screen. And yeah, alright, I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so why no tutorial? That's the toughest question I have.
I know. Honestly, it's been one of the biggest kind of nightmares within developing the game for us. Generally speaking, the problem with developing Hell Let Loose is everyone is exposed to every mechanic almost immediately, besides some that you might unlock, at a later loadout, at a later role level. So to be frank about it, I would say our biggest weakness with Hell Let Loose is that we do a poor job of introducing players into the game, and of showing them how to play, to be honest. And a combination of it is exactly as we've spoken about with regards to your fantastic videos that help people understand the game. The game changes every update quite significantly. And so we've found, we can definitely take the time out and make a tutorial of a certain kind. I think, there's also a conversation about what type of tutorial we need. But so I suppose my first point would be that up until really recently, we haven't really felt like the game has had stuff kind of solidified enough to then say, all right, everyone, this is how, this is the exact game. That said, though, I don't want to give you a cop-out answer. I think that we're going to be looking at introducing one, even if it's just a very, very basic, press, AWS and D, that sort of thing. We know that we need to do this, and I think it's been our biggest failing on the game. Everyone will know that we've worked quite a lot to get a whole bunch of overhauls in, all this other stuff, and to be honest, it's something next time that we would prepare for well in advance.
Did you ever play a game called Forgotten Hope, which was a mod for Battlefield 1942 and Battlefield 2?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. Only until recently did I have it on my system. I just did a fresh install not too long ago. Big respect to Guderian and the guys who work on Forgotten Hope.
When I started playing Hell Let Loose, it reminds me a lot of Forgotten Hope. I used to play Forgotten Hope a lot back in the day. Forgotten Hope was always like the hardcore Battlefield 1942 for me. And Hell Let Loose has such a similar vibe to it in the best way possible. Because it does have that hardcore feel to it, but it's not, as I always say, it's enjoyable realism and not just a striving for a simulation,
Yeah, totally. I think Forgotten Hope. Forgotten Hope had quite a big influence on us. I think obviously I've said it a lot of times, but Project Reality was another big one. For Forgotten Hope, I think the biggest influence Forgotten Hope had on us was the breadth of the experiences and the quality of their art team. And of the design. Their artwork is so cohesive and really immersive, and went a huge way in making you feel like you're a part of those battles. I think that was something.
Any other major inspirations for Hell Let Loose?
I think Red Orchestra, with regard to the idea of two teams kind of pressing against one another, with leaders trying to find that small chink in the armor that they were able to get through.
Yeah.
I think that's been a big aspect for us with Hell Let Loose, and then obviously Project Reality. The whole spawning meta is what we've taken obviously from
Yeah.
Project Reality, and the implementation obviously of the ability to build fortifications and things like that have been massive inspirations to us. And then I think finally, Company of Heroes,
Yeah.
another big one. Obviously, everyone can kind of discuss as to how much we should have taken, or if we haven't taken enough, or if we've taken too much.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But it's definitely been a big influence on us, and I think will has already started to and will continue to kind of shape the future of the game, really.
There's a surprising lack of barbed wire in this map. With the implementation of barbed wire, like, are we gonna see destructible environmental barbed wire being added? Because I think the way the changes to barbed wire have affected maps like Utah Beach, where there's just like barbed wire all over the place. It's made it, if you get Chapel, then it's good, but if you get WN4 or WN7, I think it is, it becomes such a hassle to get through all that barbed wire.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely at the moment. I mean, it's such a great example of like the development journey of Hell Let Loose, where every time we change anything, we see the way maps play it becomes completely different.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing, really. But yeah, it's our intention to basically offer players the ability to destroy it.
Okay.
We need to just basically do a little bit of profiling on it. Our main concern was that if we let players destroy all barbed wire at the minute, the amount of replication cost on the server could be extremely high. Yeah. So we've got the satchels obviously that can destroy built barbed wire.
Yeah.
And ideally we would roll that out. Just the nature of it is we've had so much. Hell Let Loose is like a story of priorities as well, where we're trying to do about 50 million things at once. And I think what will happen now is with kind of early access symbolizing us understanding what the game is. Obviously, there's arguably always fine tuning to be done on everything.
Stuff like removing airheads from the game.
No, some people love them. The problem is that this is the problem is that someone says, "Oh, we've got to get rid of airheads. They suck," and then another person is like, "They're literally the reason I play the game." Well, airheads is a good example. I mean, our idea here is that we basically give you tools to use in different situations. Airheads, I mean, ideally we would be able to allow you to do like a para drop, right?
Yes.
And that may be on the cards in the future, where we can drop you, about 300 meters in the air.
A more visually appealing way to represent what the airhead is, right?
Well, the airhead's meant to kind of represent the idea that like someone's gone ahead of you and established a location, and then you've kind of regrouped on the ground. So we could have a para drop alongside an airhead, because they do have different. They'll have different ways of presenting, different ways of countering. Yeah. Whereas obviously, on some maps, a para drop where you're hanging in the air might be just kind of suicide. Like on Stalingrad, it actually might be, because there's so little visual sightline distraction above sort of 100 meters. Whereas on Hurtgen, it might be fantastic because obviously you've got the trees kind of concealing falling paratroopers.
Yeah.
But the basic idea, I think, with Hell Let Loose, that we're always kind of keen to tell, I guess, the broader community as well, is that our idea here is to build out toolboxes and abilities that eventually you're kind of the skill in the play at a very high level is in choosing the right tool for the job right at that point. So, for instance, an airhead might be very useful on a map where you can only cross at one or two locations, cross a river in the middle at one or two locations.
Yeah.
And so to break across the river, you need to time that airhead correctly, or you need to time a para drop. So that's kind of the way we think about it.
Don't get me wrong, like you can counter these by just looking up and seeing the airhead drop or the supplies drop. But that's not always going to be the case, and when it's not, it is so frustrating to have a good push going, You're like
Yeah, and then
dominating map control. You're on top of the game. Everyone's like, you got good garrisons. You got a good push. You're starting to push back the enemy, and suddenly, like before you're starting to put any actual cap pressure in, suddenly the enemy is behind you.
Yeah, no, you want relatively telegraphed attacks where you feel that you can defend from them. But I mean, I think the thing will be is we'll be able to, with Halftracks, we'll be able to reduce the we'll be able to increase the cost of an airhead. I mean, the economy is changing as well with resources. It's going to be much more about scarcity than it is about surplus. At the minute, it's just ridiculous. Like the surplus is just absurd. So you'll find that they'll be used far less, and probably will be used basically after a team has got their their half tracks destroyed or their supply trucks destroyed as well. So I would just say, don't worry. I think that we need to keep airheads in because there are some maps coming that will mean that if you don't have it, you may just be fucked, and it will just be like an endless meat grinder.
All right.
Across a bridge, for instance. But I would say, I agree. Like the more that we can keep action on the ground, the stronger the game. No one wants to have to be defending from like spawn points dropped from the sky, really.
I think map control is something that actually is absolutely. I think it's better in Halftracks than in basically any other first-person game I've ever played. Which
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it's one of the strongest things in the game because games like Battlefield.
There's no map control.
There's no map control. You just run around and shoot people, right? You don't actually need to hold a position. While in Halftracks, holding key areas, like a single building in something like Purple Heart Lane, can be absolutely key to success. And I love that. I love that. Because it represents like a more tactical approach to the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what sort of we feel as well. In so much as just making it's a really important aspect of it, and if we break it, it becomes terrible. It just ruins the game. And it was why we removed Ninja Garys as well, because essentially people spawning their entire team, teleporting their entire team on top of you is the least fun game mechanic in the world. When we really need the ability to, you can't defend against people who just appear. With the Airheads, we're hoping that the fact that obviously you can see them coming down, that lets you kind of do something against it. But I agree, it's not optimal for how frequently they're used. But I think our solution here will be to introduce sort of better options rather than just like straight removing it at this point, because I think it could. I think airheads will have a use, but less commonly and in specific maps, basically.
I think a lot of people don't realize how hard balancing the matches is, given how uneven each match is in terms of the players playing and everything like that.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely. And then what you always find with Hell Let Loose is something that one person absolutely hates. Another person, like I said, just loves.
Yeah, that must be. I do not envy having to scroll through the community feedback.
Yeah, it can be quite difficult. I think the main thing we just would like to ask the community is to kind of, we're really keen for kind of constructive feedback, or feedback that where players have thought about like the actual final outcome of the game. We're keen to avoid feedback that is, a tanker wanting to make tanking more powerful. Like, for instance, it's totally understand if, jittering in a tank, which we hope we've fixed. Jittering in a tank is extremely annoying and horrible. Definitely something we want to fix. We want to remove the randomness from it. But if it's just like, just to make tanking easier or make it more powerful, that's kind of the type of stuff we're keen to avoid.
I also think the game right now has a problem with extremely experienced players knowing how to exploit something like an airhead at just the right time in just the right place to completely destroy the enemy, while new players struggle to, even understand how to build a garrison.
Yeah, no, I think that's sort of the story of Hell Let Loose with regard to the way that players basically advance through their understanding of the game. I suppose something that I was kind of pleasantly surprised to see is our telemetry does show us that there's a quite an even matchup between the two sides.
That's
And so
awesome.
the question that we always have is, I mean, even the publicly available kind of telemetry of sorts, which is the sort of the Steam achievements, show that the allies have only a very slightly like it's a decimal place win percentage over the Germans at the minute. But it is definitely always a question for us to figure out if something should be nerfed, if something should be buffed, or something like that, according to like the usage of it in the game. For instance, like the reason you guys were able to steamroll those guys on Omaha, you know, maybe something that they can learn from and then counter in their next game, and they perhaps might be a little bit more careful around letting you guys roll too deep too quickly, or something like that. And so a large part of obviously what's difficult about Hell Let Loose is again that instead of like a single player game or even a game of like 3 players playing in a small team, is that people have these wildly different experiences. And so often when we get feedback, I kind of always want to know like how does that person play the game? Are they a recon player? Are they a support role? Are they a medic? What lens do they see the game through? Are they commander? And obviously, for us, it's always trying to address feedback, figure out if the feedback is really critical, or even if like we're all aiming for the end goal for what like a good game of Hell Let Loose looks like. But that's kind of just the thinking that goes into it with regard to like how we approach changing stuff in the game, and trying to sort of make it better. So, I mean, update 10 represents, a whole bunch of new stuff coming in, tweaks and changes to stuff that we feel will improve the meta. I mean, we feel that it's greatly improved offensive mode. I don't know if you've managed to play. You'll see a couple of changes across the board with regard to, I mean, particularly I think offensive mode plays far better now. It's a far more focused experience, and it's a far...
Because you reduce the points from 2 to 1, right?
That's right, yeah. And as a result, the preparation is much more... the preparation both teams can do is much more focused. And it feels like a far less like long game. I mean, previously offensive mode could last for like 3 hours, which is just ridiculous. So we feel that that's playing really well. We actually feel that it's maybe even playing stronger than Warfare at the moment. Nice. Just because you really do experience both teams have a singular objective that everyone is kind of pulling towards, really.
You mentioned the balance between the teams, the win rate between Allies and Germans being close to evenly matched. Was that not the case before Update 9?
It's very hard to tell. We've got telemetry under the hood that kind of gives us an idea. At the start, the Germans had the advantage. Then the US had the advantage. But it's never been massively wildly different. It's never been like every the US wins 2 of 3 games. And now if I check, I think it's something like even the Steam achievements, since we've brought the Steam achievements in, it's like there's a decimal point difference between the two of them, I think currently favoring the Allies. So we're always going to keep an eye on that and always kind of keep reworking it. But I even have to say it's certainly closer than we thought it would be. It's closer always than we think it would be.
What is your wildest dream? I wish we could have this, or
It's very tough, right? Because basically, if you look at our update history, almost every update has kind of added something quite major to the game that's changed sort of the way that it's played. In a significant way, and that's been good because it's kept it sort of fresh, but it's also been bad because people get used to something and then it's changed it and they may not like it and all the rest of it. So I think for us, even just small stuff like new theaters, new guns, I think that when we get... So the 2 big things that are really high priority at the moment are to basically introduce the Panzer IV for the Germans as their stock medium tank, and make the Panther and the Tiger special tactical call-ins as opposed to just the standard. You should not be seeing a Tiger like every game. It was such a rare tank. It's meant that a lot of our AT balance has been massively weighted towards heavy armor. And the same goes with the jumbos as well. So we're really excited. We've got the T-34s for the Russians, which we feel is performing really well. We've got the Panzer IV for the Germans, which is coming down the pipe. We wanted to have it in for Update 10, but unfortunately, the sheer amount of kind of content for Update 10 made our QA team say, "Okay, guys, can you please just slow down here for a moment?"
Yeah.
Yeah. Those poor guys. It's a lot of new stuff in Update 10 already. And then just kind of more of the stock Sherman. Instead of seeing jumbos all the time, or the bigger gun versions, we'll get the stock version in for the US. And so we want to kind of shift the armor meta more towards medium tanks, with heavy tanks and interesting tanks being more of a concerted commander decision rather than just like they're always there. So I think that's going to be a big significant thing on the meta. So the second part that I think is that half-tracks will really have a significant and interesting effect on the way the game is played.
Have you guys tested that internally already?
Not yet. No, not yet. That's basically kind of first priority. We've done a lot of we've gamed it out a lot. We tend to just game things out a lot and look at tactical maps, think about where we would try and take the thing. How would we play it? What would we do with it? A lot of that goes into the cost of bringing it in. Will it be part of the vanilla lineup or not? And essentially what we're aiming for is a game that tactically and strategically, when you're a new player starting out, not much of it makes sense to you. But as you become more and more experienced, the experienced players look around, they say, that's an airhead going down, and they know what that means.
Yeah.
They immediately know what that means. And we think that we'll see the same with half-tracks, where these will basically allow sort of mechanized infantry to push deep into red territory, enemy occupied territory for people who don't know, and spawn their team in much like a garrison, but unrestricted by the normal rules that affect garrisons.
Nice.
So that's kind of something we think will really radically affect the meta in a positive way, rewarding the placement and the daringness of the drivers. If you play conservatively with a half-track, obviously you'll keep it alive longer. If you play really, if you're managing somehow to protect the half-track up to a point that it can actually get on the SP, you've done something really kind of special, within the context of Hell Let Loose. It's a hard thing to do. So I think those things, we'd love to get in fire. We're keen to do a fire update, sort of Molotov cocktails, flamethrowers, that sort of thing.
Yes.
We think that could add something really interesting to the game. But yeah, other than that, radically different battlegrounds that battlefields that people haven't played in yet.
Do you want to talk to me about like the map design process? Why Stalingrad, why Kursk for the Eastern Front is the two main starter maps?
Yeah, I think that Stalingrad and Kursk, when you think about the Eastern Front, you really do. I think that's a place people's mind goes to first. Often, we've obviously got Kharkov, Moscow outskirts, lots of like amazing, huge battles, and obviously with Kursk, we've chosen a very, very tiny portion of land where like the broader Battle of Kursk spanned, I think, about 150 kilometers, maybe even more. With Stalingrad, we really felt like that had a very iconic location in our minds. Both with regard to the media that we've consumed, and then also the battle itself is, arguably one of the largest battles in human history. I think it is the largest battle in human history. So, I guess the historical importance of it, the name recognition, the fact that most people have some inkling of what Stalingrad is, of what Kursk is. And then on top of that as well, that they were really dramatically different to what we've already got in the game was a massive appeal to us. We've done some semi-industrial environments before with, I think probably Karantan being the most industrial so far. And so with Stalingrad, we really wanted to do a different type of gameplay flow, multi-story buildings like the one that you see in front of us here. Lots of cool kind of different proportion changes with Stalingrad, obviously. It's all about much larger city blocks. And obviously here we are, we're in Grudinen's steam mill, which was the mill that I don't think the Germans ever took it, but it sits behind Pavlov's house,
Yeah.
which is just the building to our southwest there, to the 228. One of the yellow apartment buildings that sort of famously ended up becoming marked as a fortress on German tactical maps. Yeah.
When you start, like, when you go about developing a new map, let's say Stalingrad here, do you think, like, okay, we're gonna have, you know, top right side of the map, we're gonna have this landmark location, and that's gonna make for this type of gameplay, and on this other side, we're gonna do this. So, you know, like, do you conceive of that part of the gameplay when designing the maps?
Yeah, definitely. So I work with so the level designer who owned both Kursk and Stalingrad is Grietzen, fantastic level designer. And the way that we basically start, I can take you through the process, is we'll find a location using historical maps. We'll find the actual location of the battle, obviously.
Yeah.
And then we will, because obviously, you know, the Battle of Stalingrad was a whole city. We then kind of zone in and say, well, you know, we may not be able to do the whole battle in this one area, obviously, because Stalingrad had so many components to it that people want to see. They want to see tractor factory, grain silo, the railway station, you know, Fallen Fighters Square, and Pavlov's house. So
Kursk seems like it's gonna be one of those maps with a lot of open space. When I only played it once on the PT, unfortunately, but I do remember it being like very wide open spaces.
Yeah, Kursk is an interesting one though, because I think people assume it's going to be kind of Purple Heart Lane 2.0, when most players have received it almost like Foy, Eastern Front Foy, because we do offer in the idea that there are open spaces, but you can take trenches to make sure that you kind of stay in terms of infantry combat.
Okay.
So I'm keen to see what you think after you've played it a couple more times, but I think Kursk is one of those maps where when you learn the trench networks, you have you're a very powerful player because you know how to attack the point.
Okay.
That was our chief concern with Kursk, was how hard is this going to be?
Are you going to make specific balances to maps in terms of, like, for example, will more tanks spawn naturally on Kursk than other maps, given it was a major tank battle?
This is the tough thing for us, because to do map-specific rules will then mean that you're changing the competitive dynamic on every single game. And not only does that become a huge amount of work just for the dev team to maintain those specific things on every single map, but it also sort of weakens the competitive nature of each game. You know, you're having to change everything you do every single time. So what we prefer to do is, because Kursk is a wide open map, we want to make it so armor is the natural way that your commander would spend his resources, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
Knowing that you're facing wide open spaces, armor dominance is key. And so what we've kind of seen on Kursk is that, you know, whereas in some of the forest maps, people aren't so excited to spawn a Tiger tank in, on Kursk, it's quite a key aspect to it. So this is one of the difficulties of, like, you know, where historical reality meets a game. And you kind of have to decide, do you only do very locked, narrow map-specific rules, or do you try and create a competitive atmosphere map to map and then have the map be the determining factor of how the game is played, if that makes sense? We feel that if we meant that it was all map specific, the quality of the game from game to game would be very difficult for us to achieve, if that makes sense, because you know, all your strategies on one map that you've been learning won't work, and instead of adapting it for the map, you're having to relearn a completely new set of vehicles where only the most absolute hardcore person would probably need a website to remember. Whereas we're kind of keen to keep the same tools in the toolbox and see how you use them differently per map, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, yeah.
We've learned a lot since we did Purple Heart Lane even, where we're going to go back to the Western Front maps while we sort of simultaneously work on the Eastern Front and other things, and really look at kind of trying to fix up some of the worst aspects of them. We know we did a pass on Foy. Town, the outskirts position was way too close up to the center, so we tried to move that down. We're looking at Omaha at the moment, actually. We know that a lot of the strong points on Omaha are offset too much. So a lot of what we try and consider now, where we can, is trying to keep those strong points as centralized as possible. And then also trying to make sure that, that we're offering you enough cover that may not have necessarily been there on the day, so that at least you can make kind of strategic decisions. And we generally tend to find about 100 meters, 50 meters is about the maximum you'd want to go with no cover. We don't want to make it so punishing or so vehicle dominant that the infantry just is unviable. I was just going to show you here, this is a really good example. So the strong point obviously down there, the train station. This was obviously a huge railway that basically went down the middle of Stalingrad from north of the Volga to the south. And this white wall that you see at the bottom here wasn't there in real life.
All right.
It wasn't there. There's those sort of dirt embankments that you see just beyond them.
Yeah.
They weren't there either. And so, what if we were to be completely true to real life? You would have, can you even imagine, like, a 200-meter run?
Yeah, that's like what? Yeah, 250 meters over to the other side, basically.
Exactly.
With pretty much nothing.
Exactly, and so by just giving even this crucial wall here, you at least offer a good garrison, good OP location that lets you then leapfrog up, and also you're also down on the ground where most of the defenders are firing from the ground, so you can actually use this here as cover because you don't have an elevated defender in front of you.
An argument I see from a lot of, like, some of the player base is like, oh, you know what, I want the weapons to be as accurate as possible, I want, everything to be as historically accurate as possible. But then again, like a 50v50 is not accurate to basically any engagement ever, right? You're never gonna have the exact same soldier count on one side as the other one in an engagement. So the premise is flawed in its inception, I think.
That's right. And that's kind of fundamentally the case, is that, I understand people saying, hey, there are too many automatics in the game right now. We tend to agree. We're going to actually be replacing a couple of the automatics on some of the roles that shouldn't really have them, with some different, more kind of interesting selections that aren't automatics. But that's 100% the case. A lot of the time, if we were to tailor, I'm talking, more about sort of map-specific stuff. Not only would you not want to play on the map because you just simply wouldn't have the ability to win. We also make the game quite uncompetitive. We wouldn't see the kind of conversations around fixed elements of the meta that we see, because obviously half of it would work on one map, half of it wouldn't work on another. So it definitely has been a decision that we made to in order to make the game feel kind of competitive, like you can kind of learn how to play, and that whenever we show a new map, people can say, ooh, I wonder if this would work on this map, or I wonder if, for instance, the satchel charge is a kind of a good example. We watched in the PTE one of the games be won by an 11th hour Soviet satchel charge in the mill that ended up taking out 3 floors of players, basically. It was this guy didn't, I don't think this guy knew what he had done, but he basically wiped
out
them
the
all
entire,
out. Until you see that, you might think satchel charges is completely useless. Like, how on earth do you use this? Or people might say, oh, it's just for taking down vehicles. or whatever. But yeah, I mean that's kind of what we're always thinking about, is trying to introduce like quite simple mechanics, in so much as a satchel charge is a timed explosive that explodes and does damage, right? It's quite simple. But that when you change the nature of the map, it might be something that isn't appropriate for one map, because it's, for instance, on maps without, like Cursed, for instance, you may only use satchel charges for trying to take down a particular tricky machine gun position, or maybe clear out a building, or maybe go for a tank. But in Stalingrad, you're able to clear some of these huge buildings quite effectively.
I actually have the opposite anecdote. I lost a match in Utah Beach because I satcheled the church just as our team was overrunning the enemy, and I TK'd like 6 guys, and we lost the middle point, and we never got it back.
Oh no, exactly. I mean, but that I think that's such a good demonstration of it, though, because we could definitely say, well, satchel charges weren't present here. They only had Bangalores for the Americans, so no satchel charges. And then all of a sudden, the quality of the games that you have basically becomes incredibly varied.
I understand.
And instead of you learning like the game and how to use satchel charges, you're kind of having to keep a giant note of like what's actually available to you game to game. So that's kind of I think I just wanted to talk about the bit of the decision making there, because I do understand that the more historical, those who are more historically focused, I can see why their complaint would be that we should match it to that more. For us, we feel that it keeps the game competitive to make sure that that you're not having to relearn what everyone has every game. One of the problems of it, obviously, is that we do have a Tiger tank. The commander can spawn a Tiger tank at Stalingrad, and obviously Tiger tanks emerged later than the Battle of Stalingrad. But the way that we sort of aim to fix this is by introducing a greater variety of other cheaper earlier war vehicles, the Stug, things like that, the Panzer IV, maybe some more Panzer IIIs, Panzer IIs, in order to try and kind of balance that out. But it's definitely tough, right? It's extremely tough, because you kind of have to then say, well, where's the cutoff if you're going to do a cutoff? Even just with the customization side of things, it's a nightmare. Like if we were to be historically accurate, I mean, people would just be wearing one uniform, and that would be it. It would just be the one uniform per map, which then obviously kind of negates the purpose of that.
Of the entire system. One thing we didn't talk about is this game is coming to PS5 and Series X. It's gonna be like the only game in this quote-unquote like milsim genre arriving on consoles anytime soon, I guess. What made how did you take the decision of bringing the game to consoles, and are there any sacrifices or any adjustments that are going to be like console specific? Obviously you're probably still in the work in progress there, but yeah, I was really surprised by the decision, and I think it's going to be, especially for the PS5 where each controller has a microphone already, I think it's going to be very cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was kind of my feeling, right? So the way I got into games like Hell Let Loose was, I was a Call of Duty player, and I played a whole ton of Project Reality after my friend sort of forcibly told me to get it. And there was nothing that said that I was a Call of Duty player more than a Project Reality player, other than the fact that I hadn't experienced it yet. And what I'm sure what you've found is, you weren't born and then started playing sort of milsim or hardcore shooters.
Oh, that actually was the case.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, second birthday. Here's your copy of Arma 1. Here you go. But yeah, players get introduced to these concepts, to these games. And so what we really felt with Hell Let Loose was, well, let's try and introduce as many people to this as possible, because we kind of felt like this is kind of the adult version of a shooter. It doesn't rely purely on Twitch Twitch shooting. It requires quite a bit of thought. Obviously, you can just play it as just a shooter and just run around, trying to fire accurately at people. But there's also many other different things that you can do in the game that I think for people who have played shooters a lot become more interesting than just shooting at targets, if you know what I mean. So that was kind of the thinking we felt about the consoles, in so much as, console players have played a whole ton of DayZ. They play a lot of Hunt Showdown. They play PUBG. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is, it's a brutally forced teamwork game. You can't really play that without communicating, or not successfully. And as you've said, they've all got microphones. It's gone are the days where, console players don't use microphones. They're sitting 1,000 meters back on the couch, and they're not particularly into it, and they don't care. So what we thought is, well, look, why not see if all these console players who have been playing a whole bunch of hardcore games in other genres might be interested in playing a hardcore game like this, basically. And so far, we think that, it could be really, really interesting to see. Exactly as you've said, we may be the only game on there that offers this type of experience, and it could be really good. It could be, they might all look at it and say, what on earth is this? But I think quietly, we're hoping that they look at it and they say, oh, I've, never tried anything like this before. This is kind of giving me something that all these other games are not giving me. And that they might try and stick around, and that we might see, kind of a whole new group of Hell Let Loose players kind of come about on console. In terms of sort of sacrifices we've made, we read a lot of the community comments, and every sort of design decision that the community sort of doesn't tend to agree with, they assume that it's because of console. It's actually not the case. I mean, the only thing really that we're having to do for console was change a little bit of the UI stuff. That's been a bit of a technical challenge, just because of how complicated sort of the deploy menu and things like that is. Nothing else really has been a console concession, if you like. The changes that we had to make for console, which again, like I said, is UI stuff, so that you could basically use the main menu with a controller. The only difference within the console version of the game that won't be available on the PC version of the game is that you'll have auto aim on the console in the same way that you have auto aim for every first-person shooter on console. It's set up the same way. And anyone who's played with a controller without auto aim, and I really say you should give that a try, will realize how important it is to being able to hit anything. Every game people play on console in first-person shooter, I mean, really any game they play on console has an element of auto aim to constrain your aim to a target. That's just kind of standard fare. And just to hammer it home, that is not going to be on PC. That's the big difference.
Okay.
That's the big and only difference. But yeah, I mean, other than that, we're having to... I would actually say that the PC product will benefit, and we're hoping that people do see this in Update 10, but will benefit from a lot of the optimization we've been doing for the next-gen consoles to make sure that we hit kind of 60 frames per second on those. So we've been able to share a lot of the optimizations, which has been really good. So we're hoping that you'll start to see some of those in Update 10. And kind of into the future as well. In terms of the other challenges with console, I mean, we just had to scale the team up a lot. We're working with a fantastic other studio called Flix, who are assisting us in taking it to console. That doesn't mean game design. That doesn't mean anything other than
just porting.
Sorry. Yeah. I mean, porting is kind of a dirty word. I mean, it's more kind of, I guess, a conversion, in so much as we've had lots of conversations about, like, for instance, how should the map work on console, trying to be sensitive to, like, what we're doing with Hell Let Loose on PC, and making sure that we present that as closely as humanly possible to console players. But yeah, same thing, 100 players, same maps, same roles, same everything,
Yeah.
same same HUD, same all the rest of it. Yeah.
What games do the guys at the studio play apart from Hell Loose, and what is personally your like gaming guilty pleasure? If there's any game you're actually ashamed of playing?
What do we like? You know what though? We've actually been playing quite a bit of Hell Let Loose, which is hard. It's hard to play because it's just like you just see everything that goes wrong. Players will look past it. Well, sometimes, but we just see every mistake that is there. But we've actually been really having quite a lot of fun with it as a whole team, and obviously we want to make sure the whole team is in it because. We want we want people to understand the dynamics of the game, what players love about the game, all the rest of it. But we have been playing quite a bit of Hell Let Loose. I know a lot of the team love Hunt Showdown.
Nice.
I know that a lot of us have been playing Baldur's Gate 3. What have I played recently? I've been playing a massive mixture of stuff. I've been playing some deck building games,
Oh, cool.
Griftlands and Trials of Fire. I played Disco Elysium recently. I think in so much as guilty pleasure, I think we don't even feel guilty about the stuff that we play because a lot of us are just trying to see like, as you know, gaming is such a massive art form now.
Yeah.
We're always just trying to see. Basically, we'll look on Steam, and if there's a game that we're like, how on earth can anyone find this fun? I will basically get it and check it out and see like how do people find this game fun. That's always one of the most interesting questions for me. So one of the weirdest games I played recently was a game called Melville Idle, which is just an idle game, which is perfect for when you're working because you just alt tab and it goes in the background basically.
Yeah.
It's I played some Sekiro recently. Sometimes a single player game is nice to play, obviously, just to unwind and relax. Although
definitely.
Sekiro's not a great game for relaxing.
No. I'm not a big From Software fan. I could not get into Sekiro for some reason. Like the parry window just did not want to work with me, and I don't know. I lost my patience with it. I did enjoy Ghost of Tsushima a whole lot, though.
I'm keen to give Ghost of Tsushima a go. I'm really keen to.
Fantastic game, and the Legends mode is just insanely good. I'm
definitely keen. I'm definitely.
I actually made a couple of video like build guides for that, which I highly recommend because it's a really fun game to get it to be like OP. You start off and it's really hard, and then you get to be like completely decimate enemies that would absolutely destroy you earlier on.
That power curve sounds really good.
Oh man, the power curve in the Legends mode is just the best. It's incredible. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. And in the main game as well. In the main game, you go from basically being a sword guy to basically Batman on steroids.
Oh, wonderful! Yeah. I'm really enjoying those kinds of games at the minute. I mean, Cyberpunk. I know Cyberpunk had a lot of kind of technical issues at release, but it had that power curve was quite fun towards the end, where you could kind of shut down an entire area just with your mind and things like that. So I'm definitely keen to hop into Ghosts.
Yeah, I dropped off Cyberpunk because the amount of bugs were just like I could not finish quests and stuff like that. Some people got better experiences and stuff, but I just could not. Like after failing the same quest like 2 or 3 times because like certain events would just like not trigger, I was like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. I totally appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, no real guilty pleasures per se. Just playing everything is always wonderful. Yeah.
All right. I think like I don't really have any more questions or anything. If there's something that you guys wanna comment on or talk about or show?
I think just the final thing I want to say, and kind of addressing it more to to anyone who likes playing Hell Let Loose, is that just because we're leaving early access doesn't mean the game is done. Like we're still in the middle of development. This is still the game has so much more content to come, so many more mechanics to come, so much more polish to come. Leaving early access kind of represents us having reworked some of the fundamentals of the game, so that we then hopefully won't need to rework them again. And by that we mean, some of the sound systems, the animation systems. I think we've all got a pretty good sense of what the meta of Hell Let Loose is. It's spawn points that players place. We've got most of the key areas in, and now it's about polishing, it's about expanding, and it's about sort of continuing to push the game forward and making it as good as we possibly can. So just want to assure everyone in the community, if there's something that you don't like or something that we've said that we want to do but isn't in the game yet, this isn't a finished this is a finished product in so much as some of the infrastructure and the foundational stuff under the hood. But we certainly have a lot more to do when it comes to maps, balancing maps, adding vehicles, adding commander abilities, adding weapons, adding gadgets, adding a whole bunch of stuff.
What's in store? What's in store for players after the update? After update 9, what can we expect to get for the Q3 and Q4 part of the year?
We're just figuring that out at the moment because obviously console launch is coming, and we're just kind of we're hoping for the best and preparing for the worst at the moment. So we've got basically, like we always do, a giant list of stuff that we will address if anything pops up. So like for all of our releases, we're waiting to see what pops up, what the community talk about the most, what the community want fixed the most. So we'll have a little bit of that. We're also aiming to we'd love to get Halftracks in as soon as possible because we think they'll positively affect the meta. We would love to address any sort of balance concerns that pop up, any bugs, crashes, all that sort of thing. We want to finish the base roster of vehicles for the forces, so the stock Sherman and the Panzer IV. We wouldn't mind getting things like the FG-42 in, the trench guns. We will continue if depending on where optimization gets to, we'll continue optimization. And then we need to bring in more Eastern Front maps, particularly winter maps. And beyond that, next year in the future, we'll look at potentially additional forces and other, perhaps the British force.
The British would be so nice.
I would encounter, yeah. So, what we're doing at the minute is we're just expanding the team, as much as we can, as fast as we can, to basically make sure that we kind of try and maintain a consistently high quality, and keep pushing what we've got currently further. So, we'd like to do some reworks on Purple Heart Lane, on Omaha. We'd like to look at sort of the least played maps at the minute and think about what might be causing them to be the least played. I mean, the list is sort of endless, but we're definitely going to be actively supporting Hell Let Loose for years to come.
All right. Okay, thank you again, Jono and Max, for just this awesome opportunity to talk to you.
Oh, pleasure, man. Thanks so much for, following the game, being, creating amazing content. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
On to another call, but lovely to talk, Mono, and
yeah, thank you very, very much for all your time and
oh no, my pleasure, man, my pleasure, and look forward to chatting in the future, dude.
All right, me too.
Cheers.
I'll see you 2 days from now.
Sweet, cool, yeah, I'll see you then. Awesome, thanks, Jono. Cheers as well. Thanks, Mono. See you guys.
See ya.
Bye.